Yo, 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 this is the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJH287, also on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. We can find more content. The website is dsmsports.net. We can find everything you want to know about the podcast and more content as well. And, of course, follow the podcast, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. We have a best of episode for y'all today. I try to do these once every quarter. We're barely squeezing in here in the second quarter of 2023. But good Lord, I have so many good episodes that you're going to hear from today. It just continues to blow me away. The people we get to talk to, the insights we get to hear, all the knowledge we get to glean from. So let's get right into it. You're going to hear from 6 different episodes today, episodes 177 through 182. And to kick us off, so a little preview, I guess, before we get into it. You're going to hear from Dallas Miller, Director of Digital Media for the Little League. Amobi Okugo, who is a former pro soccer player and just an athlete entrepreneur, just great insight there. Then you're going to be followed by Sean Halbmeyer. He was with the PGA Tour then. Now he's with Learfield. Really good stuff into ad operations and social and digital activation of sponsors. Then Jared Wilson, who is just one of the best in the biz in the social media space. Spent a lot of time with Atlanta Hawks, Buffalo Wild Wings. And then you're going to hear from Skylar Bowles, who is Director of Play for Spikeball. Just really, really cool stuff here, learning about Spikeball and how they leverage their viral social media content and are really growing a sport. It's really awesome stuff from Skylar. And lastly, you're going to hear from Scott Kegley, just one of the best in the biz. He was then with the Minnesota Vikings. Now he's with AMBSE, which is Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Scott is truly one of the best in the biz, one of the luminaries of the space, a true thought leader, and just great stuff from him. So to kick us off, if you're listening, depending on when you're listening to this, it is summer of 2023, which means Little League World Series is right around the corner, and you're going to hear a little bit of my conversation with Dallas Miller, Director of Digital Media for Little League. We hear about how he got started in his time with the Buffalo Bills, some great insight into Buffalo Bills social media and how Dallas helped build their social media presence up and establish their voice and brand. And then, of course, we'll hear about Little League and what they do on social, what their goals are, and how they run their strategy. So really good stuff here from Dallas Miller of Little League.
You asked me previously about the goals that we had with social, and I think we never focused on the number of followers that we had because we felt like that was kind of the symptom, not necessarily the cause of our success or failure on social. We felt like engagement was a much more important metric for us to focus on. So when we were, posting stories or video or just sort of general content, we were always focused on how engaged we were with our audience and how they were responding to us. And we felt like we made significant gains from 2015. And, since then, I think the team has really done a great job. Even after I left, they have a great team in place now to make sure that regardless of the number of followers, that the people that you're speaking to, your fans, your sponsors, your local community partners, that you're speaking to them in a way that feels authentic and resonates with them as a fan or a community member in that city. So, how you talk to Bills fans is different than how you might talk to a Miami Dolphins fan or how you might talk to an Arizona Cardinals fan. So we just wanted to make sure that we were authentic and making sure that we were building that connection with our fans and that the number of followers that we had would kind of be a likely offshoot of our success in connecting with our audience.
Yeah, I love hearing that, and I think you're spot on. And I'd love to hear how this, we'll get to how it may affect Little League as well. But especially with you being at the keyboard, so to speak, or at the mobile keyboard for Twitter with the Bills, and you were kind of on those front lines of developing or propagating a voice, so to speak, and turning that brand into a voice. And at that period in time, that's really when voice became a much bigger deal, probably starting in around 2012, when you had sort of sarcastic personalities or really outgoing or some that were closer to the vest and more professional. How would you characterize what you were trying to do with the Bills, and how much of that was kind of in your hands versus a collaborative effort with you sort of relaying what you were getting from your supervisors?
Yeah, first I would say that nothing happened in a vacuum. I felt like it was really important to be collaborative, both with the people in the communications department and the people in the marketing department, to represent our brand and the team as good as possible. I mean, I never wanted to put a specific player in a compromising position. I never wanted to tarnish the brand, although, there's one gaffe I can think of, and I'm happy to share one of the worst mistakes I've ever made on Twitter. But, it was definitely a collaborative effort. But I think one of the hardest things for me with specific regard to social media and Twitter was learning how to sort of speak the language of a Bills fan, or speaking as the Buffalo Bills on Twitter when replying to a tweet, or when coming up with copy to go with a graphic or a story or an image or whatever. That took some time to figure out, who are the Buffalo Bills? What do they sound like? What do they talk like? What sort of things do they engage with? What sort of things do we not engage with? And that just took time and patience and practice and experience to bounce a lot of questions off of people in the building to say, hey, I had this idea, what do you think? Or to have someone come to me and say, I think we should do this, what do you think? So that was really kind of the collaborative learning environment of just trying to figure out what works for that specific brand. And that's probably the most time consuming part, and something that you can't rush, because if you rush it, you won't get it right. So it's just, you have to be patient and put in the work and really understand and value information that you get from fans, from coworkers, from people in the community, from local media partners, from, things that you may pick up from other teams and other leagues and other brands that they're doing, to kind of monitor the landscape of what's happening in the social and digital space across, the sports media network. It's just, you just got to pay attention and be plugged in and put in the work. So that was probably the most difficult part, is just sort of, getting myself into the mindset of like, okay, I'm responding to this with the official handle of the Buffalo Bills. How do we do that? What works? What doesn't work? What's appropriate? What's not appropriate? And the worst mistake that I made, the Buffalo Bills were playing the Carolina Panthers in a home game. The quarterback was E.J. Manuel, and he threw a touchdown pass to Stevie Johnson in the back corner of the end zone, and I miscalculated the score in my head. I thought that touchdown tied the game, and I think I tweeted that we were going to overtime, but actually that was the game-winning touchdown, and we ended up winning the game. And that tweet ended up on Deadspin. So it was just, and it was totally me. Like, I mean, I played football in high school and college. There was a time in college when I was a math major, so it clearly wasn't that I couldn't add. It was just that, that excitement and that, that opportunity at that time was just one that I missed, and I messed up bad, and I felt horribly that I had embarrassed our organization because, we won the game and everyone's like, oh, fire the intern. So, I've taken some lumps, I've made some mistakes, but that's, I guess, just part of it. If you're going to run social and digital for any organization, it's more likely than not that you will make a mistake. And because all of these are public platforms, people are going to know. And I think the difference is, like, when you're working with an NFL team, like, the number of people that know and the speed at which you hear their response is much faster than if you're working at, a smaller organization or a smaller brand. Maybe people don't notice, or maybe they're not as vocal about, how quickly they noticed or exactly what they think about how bad the mistake that you made is. But I certainly heard about it, and reading the comments was not a fun place for me to be after that. But you get through it and you learn from it.
Yeah, it's a constantly a learning process. I mean, if you are, the one that is sending tweets, especially during a game, that is literally hundreds, thousands of real-time decisions that you're making, and you start to really appreciate that, hey, it's okay for me to take a second and reread this, and it's not all about speed. Or, hey, I need to really pick apart every single word, and is there a way this can be construed in a way that I'm not anticipating, and that could come to bite us? Or is this really what the Bills should be portraying? Or what does it say? How are we even wording this? And there's so many of those micro decisions that you appreciate more and more the longer you spend in it. And it's good. Those memories definitely stick with you, and there's a reason that story sticks with you. But at least it was an honest mistake, and most fans, I would think, would recognize that, as opposed to something that might, tarnish the brand of the Buffalo Bills and make a statement on their behalf that you wouldn't be happy with. Yeah,
and I think that's a moment where you can appreciate the passion of the fans who are fully invested in anything and everything about the team, including typos and tweets. So it's kind of the gift and the curse. It cuts both ways, that fans are so passionate and so invested in everything about, their team, in this case, the Buffalo Bills, that, they're going to have a strong reaction to something like that. So I can certainly appreciate that, but, to anyone who is a fan of a team, be nice to whoever is managing the social media accounts, because it's a real person. They have real feelings, and sometimes people make mistakes.
And so one last thing on the Bills, you mentioned that really engagement and driving engagements was the key KPI, but in a team space, you have sponsored content, you might have merchandise you're pushing, you might have community activations. Obviously, there's always ticket sales. Were there some of those marketing objectives that were part of the organic social strategy, or was that more let's engage our fans and then we'll monetize through our paid social and through our digital advertising?
Yeah, I mean, of course, selling tickets and, helping activate our sponsorships and deliver on any obligations that our sponsorship and sales team had were critically important. There were also some subscription products that, we were trying to sell. I think like NFL Game Pass was one that I remember from my time with the Bills. So, of course, there were those goals, but we always felt like, and, this is kind of a mantra from the leadership of the marketing department, that, because we had really no control over the product on the field, the best that we could do as a marketing department and as sort of the business side of the organization was to really be prepared to capitalize on any and all successes that would happen on the field. And that would sort of cyclically drive the business. That success on the field would help spur success off the field as, sort of the business side. And then that would help, hopefully, spur more success on the field. But we never felt like we had any influence or control over what would happen on the field and the success of the team from a win-loss perspective. But we had to be in position to capitalize on anything that might happen, whether that's selling tickets or merchandise or activating a contest or a prize sweepstakes or anything that we were sort of invested in. We had to be prepared to capitalize on anything that might deliver a multiple for us of 2x or 3x or 5x engagement, or, the number of impressions or eyeballs or people that are, invested in our content. We just had to be prepared. So that meant understanding, sort of what to do when things go really, really well. Also understanding what to do when things don't go well, and, kind of paying attention and figuring out the best strategies for both scenarios, because we certainly experienced both when I was there.
Absolutely love that sentiment. I'm a big believer in being ready for your moment and having a plan for how to maximize those opportunities and those wins. And it's great. I would love to sort of shift and then hear about what the objectives are like and frankly what the strategy is like when you make the move to the Little League and you're not necessarily selling tickets year round, or thinking about maybe there are more sponsor activations, and maybe it's also about growing. I'm curious, what really are the goals in your position with Little League as Director of Digital Social Strategy, and how does that infrastructure look like to support those goals?
Yeah, so helping to drive and influence participation in local leagues is one of the key things that we focus on. Obviously, the health of the program is vital. So having, parents in local leagues and strong volunteers at local leagues at the district level, that really helps our program. So we feel like Little League does a number of things. We feel like we sort of coordinate member services and make sure that all of our local leagues worldwide have tools, training, resources, best practices to run their leagues effectively at the grassroots level. So something like Little League University, which is our, sort of web-based training and education platform, in addition to like some live clinics and some in-person training, that's something that we really wanted to make sure, we were delivering those tools to local leagues to make sure that the local experience is a great one for everyone involved. During the tournament, this is sort of one of the other things that Little League does, is we're kind of like the governing body of our tournament. We're not the governing body of all youth baseball, but we sort of oversee the tournament structure. So those local tournaments, the district, state, section tournaments, those all ladder up to our regional tournaments across all of our divisions. And we are, the organization that sits over top and manages all those tournaments. And then the last thing that Little League does, that's probably what most people know about Little League, is the Little League World Series. Is that, for those 10 days a year, maybe 3 weeks or so, we are very much, a sports media property on par with the NFL, NBA, MLS, MLB, what have you. We sort of do and say things at that time of the year that are very much on par with what you see around the sports media landscape. We've got, stats, scores, highlights, reaction gifs. We have a lot more fun on social during the World Series time of the year than we do the rest of the year. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what we do during the World Series is more important, although it may be more visible. It's really important for us to make sure that we're investing our time and resources in all of those areas of our business, because they all help one another. If we have a strong, local grassroots program around the world, that really helps our tournament. And of course, the visibility and the impact of, the World Series experience and everything that is the World Series in Williamsport and our other divisions as well, that really helps to kind of create a robust program across all those different areas.
And man, Dallas, I'm my head just spinning, thinking about all these different objectives you guys have, all these different audiences you have around the world, and there's different segments. When you are developing that strategy and executing for that matter as well, how do you think about it? Are you thinking about, the audiences? This is for the youth coach. This is for the parent. This is for the kids. Is it about for the objective? This is for the grassroots, organizations. This is to help, drive more eyeballs on Little League World Series. This is to help the Little Leagues themselves, or this is more based on the international play, maybe what's going on in overseas versus in the States. How do you ultimately build out that strategy and think about those different, segments, audiences, areas, objectives?
Yeah, we definitely think about the audience in segments, whether that's, parents or umpires, caregivers, volunteers, coaches, to make sure that we're kind of giving them the things that they need. The good thing about Little League from this perspective is that the program is cyclical. Everything happens sort of, repeatedly every year with some predictability. So, we know that in the fall, leagues are doing their auditing. They may be, sort of closing up their business books for the year. In the winter, they may be doing some training and development. And then, leagues will have tryouts and draft and registration, all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Those things happen at Little Leagues around the world basically every year. And so we know that at certain times of the year, we can focus more on certain types of activities to make sure that we are top of mind for what's happening at, a local board meeting. And we've got several employees in our organization that serve on the local board of their local Little League. And they often will come in and say, hey, this question came up at my board meeting for my Little League. How would we answer this question? Or what resource do we have that addresses this question or this concern? And sometimes that's an opportunity for us to revisit content that we've created, maybe spin it a new way or add some sort of nuance or detail to an article that we've written or a video that we've produced or a graphic that we've already created, to make sure that we're still staying current. And sometimes that's an opportunity for us to create something new, because we've realized that, the resources that we have not addressed a certain topic or a certain issue. So we need to go and create the resources to answer that question. So the sort of eyes and ears that we have locally with our employees, as well as our regional headquarters and our regional directors. We're also taking feedback from social media and just trying to always optimize the program for what's happening at the local level, because there are more leagues that participate during the regular season than ever would participate in the World Series. So if we can kind of solve for that and make that the best experience possible, that sort of has benefits for other parts of the program.
So it sounds like you guys really do a tremendous job in supporting all those little leagues around the world that are, playing their games, running their leagues, getting their players developed and all that as well. Is there a place where you guys look at what an overtime does with youth basketball, or these growing just even influencers, young influencers? Are there Little League players out there that are growing on TikTok and doing some fun stuff with baseball? Is that kind of content play in the minds or on your strategic objectives, or in your mind as you think about the months and years to come? Or are you guys first and foremost about supporting what the leagues are doing and being there kind of more as an aid as opposed to a content first company all year round?
Yeah, I think we see ourselves more as an aid, but we do need to always be mindful of what the players think. what do players age 5 to 17 think of our program? Are we appealing? Do they like us? Do they want to participate in our program? That is, that's really important to us. But we also are smart enough, I think, to know that parents are generally the decision makers. So we do spend a lot of our time thinking about how we can appeal to parents and support the decision that they would make to bring their child to registration. But we definitely want to have an eye on both of those things. And we've started to take a mindset where we've started to think about the players first and make sure that everything we do in our program is what's best for the children in our program, and then sort of, flip that on its head and figure out, well, what does that mean for the adults around those children as a secondary influence. But, we definitely want to make sure that we're appealing and that the things that we do are, cool and fun, which is a challenge because some of the things that we have to communicate are not always the most fun, and not always appealing to the kids in the program. But, I think we would answer that by saying, like, having the infrastructure and, some of the rules and regulations makes for a better experience for the children in the program, even if they might not ever see it or realize that it's happening. But we definitely want to take a players first mindset and make sure that the experience for the players in the program is one such that they want to come back the next year.
Really enjoy getting to meet and get to know Dallas Miller, Director of Digital Media for Little League. Does a fantastic job, really at the helm of truly almost a sport, helping to grow youth baseball and run these and help all these Little Leagues amplify their presence and their brands. And, really does a great job there. And keep an eye out for him with the Little League World Series, of course, and listen to that full episode. It's episode 177. Next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, this is such a cool conversation. I never get to talk to pro athletes too much, but I did get to talk to Amobi Okugo, who is truly doing great stuff as an athlete, as a former athlete, helping athletes manage their businesses, manage their money, helping to make sure that every pro athlete, no matter where they're at, can really learn how to manage their business and build a brand. He is the owner and founder of A Frugal Athlete, has his own podcast called A Frugal Athlete, and Amobi just offers so much good insight into what athletes should be thinking about, how athletes can create their own content, what it's like in the locker room when athletes see other athletes with awesome content. And Amobi is a pretty damn accomplished soccer player himself as well. So just great insight from Amobi Okugo on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast. Here it is.
I feel like one of my biggest regrets, I had a flip cam. Like a buddy of mine gave me a flip cam because
Nice.
I did a vlog with them, like early when we had like an Adidas tour trip, and I did like a vlog with them, 2 vlogs, and they loved it. And the guy gave me a flip cam, was like, yo, you're really good at this. Here it is, like as a gift. And if I would have just started doing vlogs like from that moment on and like kept up with it, like regardless of how I edited or regardless of like what it looked like, I feel like my brand presence would be so much bigger than it is now. So understanding like the evolution of digital media and social media and branding, it's ever changing. And don't be afraid to like wait for the perfect moment to start. That's probably one of my biggest takeaways, or like one of my biggest lessons for your audience is start now, because as an athlete, your personal brand, lasts forever. You can only play for so long. Not everyone's going to be Tom Brady. Not everyone's going to be Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. Not everyone's going to be Michael Jordan. But your personal brand, from a brand perspective, social media perspective, how you influence your fans, your audience, and your community, that lasts forever. And in order to do that, they need to like learn about you. They need to know about you. They need to know what you like, know what you don't like, your passions, your triggers, things like that. And you can only do that by sharing. Obviously, you can share in a strategic way where you're not like giving them your deepest, darkest secrets, but you're at least opening up for them to feel like they're part of your family, part of your friendship group, part of your community, if you know what I mean.
Totally, and it's a very poignant time to be looking at it like that as well right now. When you were coming up though, both at UCLA as well as early on in your MLS career, how was social media kind of portrayed to you guys? Did they even talk about it, at the management level, or at whether it's rookie symposium or in the locker room, or was it more about like don't use social? Here's the potential bad things that can happen on social media, or was it an opportunity to help grow the league, grow the brand, and help create more fans.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was more like just don't tweet anything stupid. Don't put anything on the internet that you wouldn't want to get in trouble for. You're an ambassador for the club. You're an ambassador for the community. So don't tweet anything stupid. It wasn't in the sense of like, yo, expand your brand presence by doing this, doing that, doing this. When I first started in the league or playing professional, it was more like that's automatically for like the top players or like the guys that are like good in front of a camera or just like fit within the brand that the team is trying to promote. Whereas now the player can do it on their own, like regardless of what the team says, as long as you're doing it in a smart, tactical way. And that's where you see the shift, where in the beginning it was like, don't embarrass us. And then now it's like, okay, how can we enhance what you're already doing?
I love that. How would you characterize the literacy? And that's that word can mean a lot of things, but like, would you say that most players, most athletes that you come across, are they pretty like savvy when it comes to social media, meaning from a strategic perspective? Do they kind of know, okay, I can do this to increase my followers, or hey, I think about my engagement rate. I recognize when a post falls flat. I recognize when there's an opportunity for me to do something cool or jumping on a trend, or to look at what happens when TikTok comes out or Instagram Reels comes out? Or is it more like just, they kind of do their thing and don't think about it at that strategic level and may not be a quote unquote power user?
Yeah, I would say the younger generation of athletes are like really engaging and like really creative. Like you see how they edit with TikTok and Reels and stuff like that. Whereas like my set of age group, like they know like what works, what doesn't. I think one of the biggest things for athletes is understanding what platform is best for them. So like I might be good on Facebook versus someone that might be good on TikTok versus someone that may be good on Twitter versus someone that may be good on Instagram or LinkedIn. And understanding that, I know a lot of athletes want to be everywhere at once, but unless you have a team, that might be a little bit difficult. So like for me, like originally I was really good at just writing blogs and stuff like that, or engaging on Twitter in real time. I wasn't good at video. I wasn't good at podcasts, but over time I got better in that. So now I'm able to expand. I know with the space that you work in, a lot of people talk about niche down and then scale out. So I think athletes need to follow that model. Like pick one media platform. You can be everywhere, but then pick one that like you really like. Once you master that, then you can expand. But if you have the bandwidth to expand like from the jump, okay, that's good too, because there's different demographics of your followers within each platform. So your Facebook fans may gravitate towards you in a different way versus your Instagram fans. So it's important to expand as well, if that makes sense.
Totally. I'm just sitting here like grinning and shaking my head in agreement, because like I'm talking to a pro athlete, an active pro athlete who gets this stuff, who can have this kind of deep level conversation about personal brand, about social media strategy. And does this education happen at all in pro sports? Is it something that's lacking, that, hey, if you're going to be a professional athlete, this is something you have to think about. You have to think about what personal brand is and what it means and how to cultivate it. And you have to think about how you can build a bigger fan base, more engaged fan base of you personally. Is there a gap there where, maybe part of entering the league means you get some more proactive education, or is it up to, folks like you and agents and managers to help bring this education to up emerging athletes?
No, that's a great question. From the team perspective, obviously the best teams will find ways to engage and help athletes to expand their personal brand. But from a personal perspective, I think the team should focus on crisis management. How can they avoid athletes getting in trouble? From the athlete's perspective, they should be working with agents and managers that are actively figuring out ways to expand their brand. How can they work with fellow brands and companies, how they can increase their presence? Because as you know, if you increase your presence, you increase your potential for marketing dollars. And as an agent or a manager, that's your sole job. Because at the end of the day, your performance on the field, that's going to leverage itself when it comes to negotiating contracts on the field. How can you help them off the field? So obviously the players unions and the players associations and teams will have people come in, but I think that should rely on the agent, the manager, the team within that the athlete hires to really focus on opportunities from that standpoint. And then at the end of the day, the athlete is the CEO of their own business, their own brand. So they got to be proactive in the sense of, all right, How can they engage with their audience? How can they grow their presence? And how do they know what works? Because they're the ones, for the most part, posting, engaging with the comments, engaging with the, the analytics and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just like follow the advice of some agent to maximize your brand if it's not true to yourself, and you got to be the best version of yourself, and that's how you're gonna be authentic and actually be engaging. You get the stuff. You're well spoken. You're thoughtful about it. How did this come to you? Like, have you always kind of been very cognizant and kind of thinking about things from a bigger picture perspective, strategic perspective? Like, did you have an early epiphany in your career that was like, hey, there's more to this, that I can't think about soccer 24/7. I gotta think there's more to think about and more to learn as a professional athlete.
Yeah, I mean, when I first went pro, my dad, he literally told me, he's like, oh, okay, now you're closer to the end of your career than the start of it. So I was always thinking long term. Yeah, well, it caught me by off guard. I was like, wait, no, that's not true. I just got drafted. He's like, yeah, exactly. You just got drafted. So now, like, anything that happens, it's like you're towards the end. So understanding that and having the mindset of like long term helped me. But when it came to like actually like social media and different things like that, it was a lot of trial and error. Like I would post and see what works. Oh, like, okay, that got a lot of likes. That got a lot of engagement. Like I didn't even know about engagement rate until like 3-4 years ago. And like learning like how to like small time edits, small time posts, like using Canva, different platforms to like really engage. It's all a learning process, but I feel like I've been coming all the better for it just by, taking a proactive approach, like following the trends, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and like taking a proactive approach with my own social media.
Take me inside the locker room or the team or a team bus ride or a plane ride. Are there, what's the conversations like when it comes to social media and players? Are you guys talking about the latest trends, or hey, did you try this, or how'd you do that? How'd you go viral with that? Or hey, your Instagram is fire. What are you doing? Like, teach me. Is that happening, or is it really just each guy's kind of doing their own thing?
Yeah, each guy's kind of doing their own things. Unless you like have like a crazy like amount of followers, or like if you have like a YouTube channel that's doing well, people will ask like, "Yo, like who edits your videos?" Or like, "Do you do it on your own?" They'll ask like some stuff like that. But to be honest, everyone's kind of doing their own thing in a sense. Some guys will crack jokes like, "Oh, okay, all you do is like post," or like, "All you do is do this." So it's like a little just good banter. But at the end of the day, if you're doing good work, people will ask about it. Like, all right, who edits your videos, or like, how did you do that?
Right.
I know I've asked a couple players like, okay, how are you able to put like 2 photos within an Instagram story and like keep it in together when you make another post? So like different like tricks and tips. I think that's probably where people ask like the most questions, or there's the most communication.
Oh, I love that. I'm a big believer in collaboration as well. I feel like when players engage with each other, share each other's posts, like there's so much opportunity there to really kind of partner up a little bit, just like when influencers partner up on the various platforms.
No, you're exactly right.
I do want to hear Moby, having a great conversation here with Moby Okugo, professional soccer player in MLS and USL, as well as a founder of a Frugal Athlete. I want to hear about a Frugal Athlete and tell me like kind of how did that come about, and when you have this idea that there's this need for this service. What are your first steps? What are your next steps? And I don't know how the hell you do it all while also still playing soccer.
No, thank you so much. But yeah, so Frugal Athlete essentially started out of curiosity. I saw the 30 for 30 Broke documentary, and I was immediately like motivated. I was like, okay, I play soccer in the States. We're not getting compensated as much as these guys. So how can I find athletes that I can role model or use as roadmaps to like live correctly or prudently with their money and their resources and making smart career decisions? So I did some research, and what I kept finding were athletes that either were like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, Tom Brady. I couldn't really compare myself to them, or athletes that lost it all. And while scare tactics works, I wanted to find other examples or other ways to like learn, the right way. So that's how a Frugal Athlete started. Originally started as like a bunch of blogs that I would write, just doing my own research, kind of like extra schoolwork. And then from there, it kind of caught some attraction. And I was like getting more motivated to like provide more content, to do like some due diligence and like figure out ways to like share other people's stories. So we created a newsletter, did a podcast. Now we're doing video content. Now we've been able to now we do workshops, speaking engagements, some small time consulting, as well as hopefully in the near future we'll have some courses out. So that's really what it is. We want to be like the ecosystem for people to come in and learn about financial literacy through athlete stories and athlete examples, because we know athletes are natural trendsetters. So if athletes can talk about financial literacy in a smart, engaging way, the people that follow them will also try to follow suit.
I love hearing that origin story. I mean, I think a lot of people had their eyes open when they saw that broke 30 for 30. I can also recall, I think it was maybe last year's Hard Knocks, where there was a player, like trying to explain like very basic financial literacy, and it became like the butt of a joke. And there's some truth in that joke though, which probably speaks very much to the service that you're trying to provide and the knowledge you're trying to get out there. It's just super interesting to see that all sort of start to come together. In your vision for a frugal athlete, is it eventually going to be something that you want, like is something that leagues should be partnering with us to help educate their athletes in financial literacy? Is it something that you work with agents, something that you want athletes to come to you because they know they need this knowledge? Or how do you kind of see, and obviously it's still, you're still doing it right now and it's growing, but like what's the vision for a frugal athlete at the end of the day?
No, thank you. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah, so we'd love to partner with various organizations, leagues, schools, players associations. We've already connected with the MLS. We've spoken at the Rookie Symposium 2 years running, but if we can get more involved with other organizations, that would be great. Definitely want to be partnered with other platforms as well. Just using athlete stories, sports terminology to teach financial literacy. We just feel it's more engaging. Essentially, if you think of Penny Hoarder, Players Tribune, and Business Insider, we want to be like if they had a baby, but financially focused. That's kind of like our end goal.
No, that's a really interesting insight too of all these. I mean, player-led content, player-led publications are really on fire right now, and no one is really outside of you guys are attacking this area of true things that athletes need to know about. Yes, it's great that we're seeing all the stuff about mental health, about racial injustice, and players telling their stories. But how can we make sure that players are getting educated on this very important part of things? And I'd love to hear like what are some of the biggest either misconceptions or things that you have to make sure that players know right away when it comes to financial literacy? Are there things that you find that are like the 1, 2, 3 most important things that either players don't know about or players should know about?
I think the biggest thing right now is just for athletes to understand the basics. It's like when you talk about, football or basketball, it's not like you knew every playbook. You didn't know a nickel set. You didn't know a 3-4 scheme. You just knew, you knew how to tackle properly so you didn't get injured. You knew how to run a route. You knew how to do this. So once you get the basics down, and then you can start getting complex. Athletes have a lot of money, and then you immediately, all right, what startup can I invest in? It's like, no, you haven't even properly understand how to properly budget your income to expense ratio. So get that down first. Okay. And then how do you think long-term? How do you diversify? So as an athlete, are you going to be just solely focused on, going right? Everyone talks about James Harden as being one of the better scorers. It's because he can go left, he can do mid-range, he can shoot threes. All right, apply that to your finances. Okay, you have cash, you have stocks, you have real estate. How do you diversify? And first of all, don't do it all at once. You got to get one down. Okay, then you move on to the next one. Then you move on to the next one. And now you have that total package. Or if you're a GM, treat your finances like you're a GM. You're not going to get a team full of veterans because, they're more susceptible to injury. You're going to have some potential draft picks. You're going to have mid veterans. You're going to have, different things like that. Mm-hmm. So understanding all these different concepts, I think is really important. And then obviously you want to have the right team around you. I think a lot of people, whether it's having a yes man or, just people that aren't there for your best interest, I think that's one of the biggest talking points that athletes are still trying to figure out, because it's like, how do you know who to trust when you're new to this, So not being afraid to hire fast, fire faster.
Thanks so much to Amobi. Definitely recommend listening to that full episode 178, and checking out his podcast and his presence. Just Google A Frugal Athlete or look up Amobi Okugo on any social platform, and you'll find all his stuff that he's working on. Next up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast, you're going to hear some of my conversation with Sean Halbmeyer. He was then in revenue operations, ad operations for the PGA Tour. Now he's with Learfield in the college athletic space. And Sean is just so super smart about how all this stuff comes together. When you're thinking about social media advertising, when you're thinking about how things really work with activating a partner, with building campaigns for a partner, Sean just offers so much good insight. He's really smart about this stuff, and now, of course, doing good things with Learfield, then giving us insight into the PGA Tour and all the things that they're doing. And so listen up. So from part of my conversation with Sean.
I would say usually digital is part of the broader package, right? So again, whether you're buying a naming rights to a tournament and you're becoming a title sponsor, or even if you become an official marketing partner and you get rights to our logo and our name and things of that nature, I would say generally speaking, most brands, again, it'll vary based on like B2B versus B2C and kind of what their goals are, but most of them will have basically different spend buckets that they can tap into. So, there may be a bucket that's specific to tournament hospitality, or more experiential type things at our tournaments versus there's going to be a media bucket, or there's a couple different media buckets. There's generally speaking a tour-owned media bucket, which is assets that we own and operate that we sell. And then a license bucket, which is how we kind of tap into our media network partnerships. And then there's things like TPC network. So basically take the 30 to 40 golf courses that we own and operate under the PGA Tour umbrella. So doing outings and things like that. And there's licensing. So there's definitely several different buckets that make up a sponsorship, but digital has certainly become a growing one for sure. In terms of like reaching the fans where they are, like digital is going to be the easiest way to go about that.
Is digital kind of that catch-all term too that covers social, covers mobile? Because when you say, okay, we're going to be spending this much in digital, that can obviously mean a ton of things. So when that's the case, or if it is kind of a little bit more granular than that, and you look at social and digital and mobile, et cetera, who defines how that money is then put to use, and how much are you collaborating with the content and social team and other even the app team and the media partnerships? Like who kind of defines that, and then how does it come together, and ultimately how is value assigned to each aspect?
Yeah, no, good question. So there's a couple different teams internally. So basically there's corporate partnerships, which is managing kind of the overall umbrella relationship with clients. And then based on the allocation that goes towards, quote unquote digital. And to your point, that's a broad term. There's a lot of things that falls into that. It would be shifted to a digital account manager. And then that group then works with, we have a client strategy and planning team, which is, their core job is to basically do media planning. So they're building plans. So they understand our rate card holistically in terms of like all the different assets that we have and what things cost, and all the analytics behind traffic and audience insights and things like that. So they're basically taking, the RFP from a client based on what their goals and KPIs are, and then they're planning media to support that. And then, but to your point around like, how do we work with other groups? I mean, that's where the overall sale from like pitch to pay nowadays is so much more complicated than it used to be, because when you're ideating, you're trying to come up with new concepts or developing new products, it definitely requires close collaboration with, take your content team, for example, or for us, we have PGA Tour Entertainment, which is our content and production studio house. And so tapping into all like the archived footage that we have, or our product team and the relative to the team that's building our website or managing our app, things like that. So anything that's going to be custom in nature certainly has a longer roadmap to it that requires a lot more collaboration than just like buying display media. Right. But yeah, it's a pretty long process, and it definitely spans multiple teams at this point on a per deal basis.
Definitely a lot to keep track of, a lot of communication, and a lot of making sure that you don't overpromise too, I'm sure, because not everyone can get – there's only so many hours in the day and only so many people you have working for a PGA Tour Entertainment, for example, and can't make promises that you can't keep when it comes to limited resources and whatnot that everyone deals with.
For sure.
I did want to talk about too then, like, and this might dovetail into a larger conversation about valuation, but when something new does come along, when PGA Tour all of a sudden now has a TikTok channel, or there is a new app feature, or there is a new platform. How do you guys? What's the process like to tackle that from your perspective and from PGA Tour's perspective overall? Of okay, this is something we can build real estate on this. We can build value on this. This becomes something else that we can monetize with, and this is approximately how we can value it. Like, what's that process like for when something new just drops into your lap? But that can create value for you and your partners.
Definitely. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not black or white. It's definitely, it takes some science to it to figure out. I would also say anytime you're going to start building something new, really your goal is to go into the client and you're selling them on an idea. You're selling them on a vision of, we want to lean into this and here's why we think that, your brand is a good fit for that. At that point in time, like, you're not trying to sell them on, you're going to reach so many people on this platform, because it frankly doesn't exist yet. We're trying to build it with them, or we're launching it off the ground. So that's not always easy, and not all clients like that. Like, I mean, there's certain clients that are more innovative and want to be seen, doing cutting edge and new things that haven't been proven yet. And then there's other clients that are like, nah, I'm good. Let me wait for 2 years and see, how that nets out. So it definitely runs the gamut. But I mean, I would say, if it's not something specific to, something literally brand new that has no historical data, those are always a little trickier. But if there's other sort of products that we're developing that, we can sort of compare to previous things that we've done, it's just an analytical exercise in terms of looking at, what would we expect that traffic to look like? Where is the sponsor going to be integrated into that? And we can always kind of back into the impressions and the unique users and things like that. So there's definitely a formula to it, but sometimes it is a little bit of a dart throw.
Oh, I can only imagine. It's every day something new to figure out for sure, and try to make sense of it. At the end of the day, too, like, it's the partners need to have something to benchmark against, something to compare it to, and that's really what you can do to help introduce some of those new ideas and new aspects. And I guess let's get into that briefly too, then, about how you guys do report and turn that into, this is why you got the return on your spend, or this is why this is a good package for you, because you're going to generate XYZ ROI. And obviously, I'm sure it's not the same for every partner, especially when you are talking about very different type brands with different audiences. But when it does come down to, okay, hey, it's whatever, every quarter, every year, it's time to evaluate what we're generating in terms of ROI for this partner, or even at the larger level, this is let's update how much we value XYZ platforms or impressions on XYZ platforms for the PGA Tour. Like, is that like proprietary, internal, just crazy big data stuff that you guys are working with? Is it a lot of collaboration with partners to make sure that how they value certain metrics and KPIs? How do you ultimately try to get that to the point where that X brand spent $3 million and they got X return?
Yeah, no, great question. I actually would say that, and I don't think we're alone in this, although I'd be interested to learn from others. I don't think it's as sophisticated as you would think, to be honest. So, like, I think, what we generally see is, if a client comes to us and they deliver an RFP, we know what sort of their goals are relative to digital and social, and depending on what the kind of umbrella or the tentpole programs are that we're building for them, like, we know at a high level what their goals are, but at the same time, it is, you're working with both the client as well as their sports marketing agency. Then it gets handed off to their media agency. And then, like, when you're sort of talking to the media agency on a day-to-day basis, it's really kind of traditional media speak at that point. So, they're going to judge you on click-through rates, which I've been on record for years saying I hope that goes away. I cannot wait for the day click-through rate goes away. I challenge anyone, when's the last time you clicked on a display banner? But that's another topic. But yeah, like click-through rates, view through rates, viewability, like all the kind of typical, digital metrics, or even on social, if they're trying to drive watch time or drive just social engagement within the post or the content, things like that. Like, that's generally speaking what we get, pushed on more in terms of making sure we're delivering on those type of tactics. Not so much like driving ROI to the overall kind of partnership at the PGA Tour league level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, given those metrics, like, are you guys able to sort of capitalize on some of the less predictable opportunities? Like, hey, all of a sudden, John Rahm hits one of the best putts I've ever seen in my life, and you guys are going to be able to generate that many more video views, that many more app visits, that many more site visits, and video plays. Like, do those extra impressions, is that just gravy, or are you guys like, oh crap, let's get ahead of the curve here and monetize these with whatever type way you can do so?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it is gravy in a sense, although like generally when you're going to sell a sponsor media inventory, it's going to be, they're either going to buy on share of voice. So they're going to get, let's say 100% share of voice of a page or of a franchise. So in that case, yes, it's gravy for them. So they win in that scenario. If it's more of a kind of a quote unquote run of line item, which is basically just capped at an impression goal, they're not necessarily winning in that scenario, but that's where you would always have kind of underlying indirect revenue streams. So leveraging programmatic, all the different SSP partnerships that we have in place to monetize unsold inventory. And so that's where we would definitely see the upside in those type of scenarios, at least specific to our O&O platforms.
I appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense. And Sean, the time's flying by. We still have a few minutes left talking with Sean Hallmeyer. He's the director of digital advertising director of advanced advertising for the PGA Tour. Just got digital on the head here, and I got a lot more we want to discuss. So we'll get a few more in here before we get to the shareable stat. I did want to talk about kind of that convergence of on-site and digital. And I mean, obviously, we're in a crazy year where on-site's not quite as exciting as it would be with crowds on-site and lots of fun on-site activations. But in a usual year for the PGA Tour, like when an on-site activation is being planned, how does digital come into play? Are they looking within the digital team at the PGA Tour for ways to kind of marry these things together with a digital side of an activation with an on-site, or even like, hey, we want to do something on-site, but let's what can we do that's more exciting, more and kind of does marry the digital and physical? I guess I think the PGA Tour does a really good job of these unique on-site activations and experiences, especially for sort of some of the luxury brands and even some of the beverage brands as well, and endemic brands. So how does digital kind of fit into there? Are you guys end up being sort of supporting what's going on site, or are there true like soup to nuts 360-degree plans put together from day zero with those activations?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, I don't think we're where we want to be. This has always been sort of my dream, right? To do exactly just that. Like, how do you sell a cohesive program that marries on-site and experiential with digital? And I think like the technology is certainly there to do it. I think the problem that we run into anyway is just sort of what that sales process looks like. And basically when we're helping a partner allocate, what does that on-site budget look like? Unfortunately, that is an entirely separate flow from planning their media. And so the two aren't kind of conjoined right now. Definitely upside there. I mean, I've definitely talked to some others in the space. Like I know Live Nation does a great job where, take Bud Light, for example. If you're going to sponsor a concert festival for 3 days, Live Nation does an awesome job around capturing data and extending sort of the shelf life of that sponsorship for Bud Light. So there's components that are more of the lead up. So how are you driving promotion of that festival, selling tickets, getting people excited for it. And then there's the during, which is the experiential part. And then there's after. So how do you create content, or it doesn't have to be content, but that's just one example. Like how can you create content from the actual event and then use that post event and sort of make it feel like it's more part of a bigger thing. And I think like for us, there's certainly opportunities to do that. And when you start thinking about capturing data or leveraging data in general, so, again, if it's trying to drive tickets to an upgraded hospitality experience, like, letting the brand leverage your digital platforms leading up and then, engaging with the fans, how they see fit at the event, and then capturing data at the event and then repurposing that and extending that. So like that's definitely my vision and where I would definitely love to get.
Awesome stuff from Sean Hallmeyer. Again, now with Learfield. Look him up, check him out, listen to that full episode 179. Just awesome knowledge shared by Sean, and he is really good in the space. Next up, we're halfway through on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast. This was such a fun conversation with Jared Wilson. Just really blew up the space with the Atlanta Hawks. Him and Micah Hart there doing awesome stuff with establishing a voice, being self-deprecating, establishing a brand, getting trust. Then we learned a bit about what he was doing back then with the Buffalo Wild Wings, which is of course the restaurant, and what it's like to work for such a big corporation. Really interesting stuff about what it means to go from a team to that corporate world. Now he's doing a bunch of good freelance social media work, and Jared really does get the space, and it offers us a ton of good insight and knowledge. So listen up, because you're going to really enjoy this part of my conversation with Jared Wilson.
I would say there were definitely some challenges there. I think front offices are generally skeptical of marketing. I think that's just kind of how it is. They're very focused on protecting the team, the players, the staff, and making sure that there's nothing that's going to kind of impede that. And I think PR departments in particular are in a really tough spot. And I think there's teams are doing better about connecting that. But when we started, they were very much in favor of us creating a voice and really, talking about the team in a positive way and in an authentic way. But they had to manage our expectations with the expectations of the front office, which is, really all about, we don't want any distractions, and we want to make sure that the team and the players are the primary focus of the organization. So, there were some slip ups and some hiccups along the way where we butted heads a little bit. And I think, most social managers for sports teams or leagues or brands will tell you that that's not uncommon. That's going to happen when you have people who are, experts in different areas trying to kind of, give their opinions on what the space should be about. But, at the end of the day, it was about building the brand. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, we did it. And, I think we got a reputation as a brand that had a really fun, savvy social voice that was one of those, must follows. And that's, we take a lot of pride in that. I think, we're proud of the work we did. And, looking back on it, it was a really fun time. And I think we grew the brand.
Totally. And I think, heck, we're talking it right now to put a date on this a little bit. It's brand week, and Ad Week is having their series of panels and discussions with some of the top CMOs and brand marketers all over. And there's a lot of discussion around the value of brand marketing. And as we get more and more data-driven in marketing, that we can't lose sight of the fact that there's this longer term, this overarching brand that we're constantly stewarding and trying to grow. And, that doesn't mean that, how your Instagram performs this week is not necessarily indicative of, how is your brand from a long-term and macro view perspective. So when you think about how you were measuring success and how you're showing that, hey, what we're doing is moving the needle, whether that's more conversation about the Hawks, a different perception of the brand. Like, how'd you guys seek to measure success, both, with hard data and without?
Yeah, it's getting a little bit easier, but certainly not, foolproof in terms of how you can measure that. I think the brand over time and kind of the long game, like you mentioned, is really what we were after. And I think we established that with some quick wins. I think the earned media stuff that we got, being mentioned on SportsCenter or being written about in USA Today, or being named a top brand in Google, whatever the quick wins and the earned media we would get, those things are always great. And really those are tangible, examples to share that what we're doing is working, but it's hard to really tell what the brand over time is. I mean, certainly you can, we looked at things like engagement rate, we looked at things like, conversation sentiment, all those things moved in a positive direction. And, I think we kind of took that as, okay, this is, what we're doing is working. The voice we have is working. The content we're putting out there is working. And it's, like you said, it's a little bit more difficult to tie that into direct business results in terms of how that equates to dollars. We got a little bit better at that as kind of time progressed and as technology improved. But yeah, I think that there's always going to be a little bit of skepticism about, is this driving the bottom line of the business? But certainly we feel like from a brand health standpoint, we were making improvements.
No, totally. I mean, win or lose, I think everyone was always interested in what the Hawks were doing, whether they were winning on the court or not. And that says a lot that, in social and in sports marketing in general, we can't control whether the team wins or loses, but we can control whether fans and the general public, give a crap about the team, about the brand, and they always did and always do about the Hawks. And I'm looking forward to hearing about what that brand is like for Buffalo Wild Wings. But before we get there, I want to touch on something that really I think about a lot looking back on the Hawks. And even when I did speak to Micah Hart on this podcast way back when, who was director of social media at the time for the Hawks as well, and that is how you guys really kicked ass when the spotlight was brightest. And it's almost like you were ready for those moments. I mean, I think everyone remembers. I think of the Hawks when you were there, and it's hard not to picture the Twitter handle name or the Twitter display name with all the W's during that massive winning streak. And so, tell me about how intentional was that of kind of being ready for those moments, being ready for those, whether it is a winning streak, whether it is a playoff run, whether it is a trade acquisition. How did you guys prepare, and how do you also leave a little bit of room for spontaneity as well?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a lot of things, and there's so much going through my head right now, so this may be a longer answer than what you're looking for. But, I think it started with the fact that we had a lot of creative people on our team. Micah, who's, I consider him my mentor. He's one of the most creative people I know, and someone who always had ideas. I think, if I remember correctly, that putting all the W's in the Twitter name was his idea. And then, when we ran out of characters, and we needed to find, we had more wins than we had Twitter characters. And so we had to figure out how to adjust. And I think moving the W's into the avatar to kind of keep them going, I think that was Melissa Proctor's idea. And she's the chief marketing officer there. And, she wasn't even dedicated to the digital team, but she had that great idea. And again, we always said good ideas can come from anywhere. So, that's, two examples right there of people contributing great ideas. And we had several others from other folks in the company as well that ended up doing really, really well. In terms of your question on being prepared and kind of proactive versus reactive, I've always said that the best content on social media is the reactive content. You can plan all you want for content, and I'm certainly not saying that prepared and proactive content doesn't do well, because we've seen countless examples where it does, but people talk about moments in real time, and they react to moments in real time. And if you, as a brand, are able to react to those same moments and tie it into your organization, and with the Hawks, obviously it was easy because it was sports and it was games being played. That's where I think you really win. And some of it was stuff that scenario planning. So hey, if this happens, we want to do this, and we had a lot of ideas that we never ended up doing because they were based on, we have to win this game for this to work, or this player has to score 30 points or it won't make sense, or the score has to be exactly this for this to be topical or to reference it, whatever. So there was a lot of stuff that we ended up not using, but I think being prepared with some of those scenarios is important. But also, my strength, I think, is just coming up with stuff as things happen. Mm-hmm. So a situation happens, a game, a player, a trade, or a draft, whatever, and trying to kind of think of those interesting content moments that you can react to. I think there's definitely something to be said for the spontaneity there, like you said, and being able to do that. So I think it's a balance.
Totally, and it's a perfect segue too, I think, into talking about Buffalo Wild Wings and making the move there, because you guys very much, as a brand, I think people come to think of Buffalo Wild Wings as being part of that conversation during the live games, and it's not unexpected to see a Buffalo Wild Wings tweet or whatnot during a live game, or even just to be talking about it and thinking about it when a game goes to overtime or whatnot. But I want to step back even from that and just talk about what it was like to make that move from a team to the Buffalo Wild Wings brand and their organization. What is that for someone that I know the team side fairly well, but not as much the side that you're on now. What does the infrastructure look like for you guys from a social media perspective, whether there's agencies involved for content creation and sort of some of the day-to-day objectives for you guys for such a big brand?
Yeah, it was an adjustment, no doubt. It was time for me to kind of make a career change and to kind of expand a little bit and try something new. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot in the 2.5 years I've been at Buffalo Wild Wings, and I still have a ton more to learn about just how brands work. I mean, this is the first national brand I've worked for. the Fox job in Colorado, and obviously the Hawks are both local brands, right?
Mhm.
So, it's fun to be on something national. Obviously, there's a lot more resources involved with the national brand, both from a people perspective, and a money perspective. A lot of brands do use agencies, and Buffalo Wild Wings does as well.
Mhm.
So, the process for me of learning how to work with an agency and communicate and, kind of have that day-to-day relationship has been something new for me that I've had to kind of learn. There's a lot with the restaurant industry specifically that I've had to learn in terms of how it's structured and how, how money is allocated and funded and divided, and just how the structure of the team is set up in terms of, you've got obviously marketing, and you've got all, so many different elements of marketing, and you've got, operations, and you've got culinary, and all these things that I've obviously never had to deal with before in terms of just learning how the organization functions internally. It's really fascinating and really awesome. And so yeah, there's been a lot, but it's been nothing but positive for me. It's been a great move, a great change, and I continue to learn and grow, and yeah.
And how does some of those, whether it's campaigns or specific goals or promotions, whether you're promoting an app or trying to drive people to come to a restaurant, or trying to promote a new product or a cool contest you want to have going, like, how does that come together, and where do you fit in? Is just a lot of meetings and collaboration and filling out briefs and project management tools? I mean, shoot, like my head's almost exploding just trying to think about all different people that have to touch something before it goes out from your actual handle. So how does some of that stuff come together for you guys?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, we have a really good go-to-market team that kind of facilitates that whole process of being able to, brief the team or get everybody organized. We've got obviously project owners who are, really responsible for the different things, and obviously they're scattered all throughout the organization depending on what the initiative is. But really it kind of centers on having a really good process, and our kind of go-to-market team is really in charge of making sure that process is iron tight, and keeping everybody in the loop and communicating with everybody. Social media is obviously one of many arms in the organization, right. and we're involved with a lot, right? So, while we're not necessarily leading a lot of the campaigns, we're certainly involved with all of them, because we have to know, right, not only from a marketing and promotion perspective, but also from a customer service perspective. People are going to be asking questions like, hey, what's this? Or, I have a question about this thing or that thing. We need to be able to answer all those questions. So it's really valuable for us to be involved with all of that. It's a lot, but it's fun. I mean, it gives you a chance to work with people in different parts of the organization, and connect with different people, and learn. I mean, learning about what other people do and what their job roles are, and how they fit into the organization. It's all good.
And what's that set up like for you guys from a social media perspective in terms of, is it all just the singular Buffalo Wild Wings brand? Do some stores have their own handles, or are they allowed to? Is there any sort of patrolling going on in that sense of whether, I don't know if it's a franchisee or a store owner is creating their own thing or doing their own thing, or like, how is that sort of structured?
Yeah, a lot of brands do it in different ways, right? Some brands allow their their individual stores and franchisees to have kind of their own social media presence. Mm-hmm. We believe that we're best with a singular kind of one voice that's coming from the top. So we have a really, really well-developed brand identity, both visually and from a voice perspective. Mm-hmm. And we feel like having it kind of centered and controlled in one spot rather than having a bunch of different accounts is our preference. And again, that's, whether that's the right way or not, it's not, who knows, right? Other brands do it differently and do it really well. But we really like to have everything come from the main handle. So yeah, we're really kind of focused on just, from the corporate side, like being able to put all of our messages out through, our one consistent social, one consistent Instagram, one consistent, Twitter, one consistent Facebook, and, really kind of communicate with one voice and one tone, as opposed to everybody kind of having having their own messages out there. So
Totally.
It's, it works for us. I think we've done a good job with that. And, it's not, it really depends on the organization and the brand.
I think it makes sense, and certainly, me as a third-party observer can say that Buffalo Wild Wings does have a very well-defined brand, and part of that is because it's a centralized, singular voice, and it's not a bunch of different people, talking or trying to interpret what they think Buffalo Wild Wings is as a brand. What was that like for you coming in? You've been there, as you said, about 2.5 years now, and when you come in and have to learn, this is what Buffalo Wild Wings is. This is how we speak. This is what we're all about. This is how we look. Was that sort of a learning process, or not a learning process, but like, do you go through just some sort of onboarding to learn all about Buffalo Wild Wings and who we are, what we are, and what we want to be known for? Like, what was that process like for you coming in new?
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting, and I probably should have said this earlier in the podcast, but just for background. So Buffalo Wild Wings is owned by Inspire Brands. They're part of the Inspire Brands group of restaurants. Mm-hmm. And it started when Arby's decided to buy Buffalo Wild Wings. So when Arby's bought Buffalo Wild Wings, they formed Inspire Brands, and that happened. I want to say it was finalized. Maybe I'm going to get the date wrong, but I want to say something like February of 2018. And when that purchase happened, the Arby's leadership team, they were looking for some talent for Buffalo Wild Wings, and social media was one of those places where they were looking to kind of bring some people in. And so I started, 1st of April of 2018. So fortunately, I kind of started on the ground floor of the new Buffalo Wild Wings is what I'll say. So we had an opportunity to really kind of start from scratch in terms of social. Like we weren't committed or beholden to anything that was done before us. We were able to kind of structure the voice the way we wanted it, the channel strategy the way we wanted it. So rather than having to come in and kind of learn, what the tone of Buffalo Wild Wings social was or the do's and don'ts or whatever, we kind of got to create that ourselves, which was really exciting. And honestly, it was a little bit similar to how the Hawks went, right? With me, as I mentioned, being the first social person, dedicated social person on the Hawks team, we got to do a little bit of that there too. And so, I'm a little bit used to, coming onto a brand or an organization and being involved with the setting of the strategy and the tone definition, the voice definition. And, there have been some tweaks here and there. We've figured out some things that work, that don't work, and have made changes. And I think that's always going to happen in this kind of industry. But it was really fun to be a part of that. And, it also, allows me to put my stamp on things in terms of, hey, this is what I believe should be, successful and not successful. So yeah, it was a fun process.
Excellent stuff from Jared Wilson. Really enjoyed hearing about the Hawks, of course, and what it was like at B-Dubs, at Buffalo Wild Wings. Jared continues to do great work. Look him up. Keep following him because he is a really smart person in this space. That's episode 180 if you want to hear that full conversation. Coming down here next up on the Best of the Digital and Social Media Sports podcast. This was an awesome person to be able to meet, be able to get insight into everything they're doing. You're going to hear part of my chat with Skylar Bowles, Director of Play for Spikeball. You probably have heard of Spikeball. You probably have seen some highlights. They have some great short form videos that have gone extremely viral on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter. And Skylar's really helping to build a sport. And it's taken off. Spikeball has become a presence across the country and really around the world as well, as you hear about a little bit in this conversation. Skylar talks about what it means to leverage those social moments when something goes viral, about how they are growing the sport, and leveraging education as well as working toward a place where Spikeball can be an Olympic sport someday. Really good stuff. Listen up to part of my chat with Skylar Bowles of Spikeball.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was, very grassroots and very much, not corporate. The CEO, Chris Reuter, when I was working with him part-time, he still had his full-time job at Microsoft, I believe. And, so everything was just kind of like, do this when you can. And I think he would occasionally pay some college students to play on campus, and that was like the extent of his marketing you know, that's like what he did, and that was it. And so when we came into the picture, I, you know, kind of brought the idea of selling it to schools and teachers, because my idea was, well, you know, if you want this to become a sport, you know, kids have to play sports in school. Why not get them to play your sport? Seems like an easy audience, because they have to do this thing every day. You know, and because it was portable, you could play anywhere. It just made sense, you know, as a PE teacher. So I kind of brought that idea in, and that's where I kind of got my niche and started going to PE conferences around the country, and really, you know, got a foothold in that community, and made a big splash there. So that's where I started. And then I think our summer of Spikeball, we called it Team Spikeball, in 2014, which is our first little part-time gig, where we played on the beaches. We made a bunch of videos, and that was, you know, the extent of our marketing, trying to make it kind of a vlog, fun, cool video style. You know, YouTube was super in back then, and we were trying to, you know, have big personalities and do fun stuff. And the videos are super entertaining and pretty cringy, and, you know, we're all just like not professionally edited, and we're all just doing it, like, you know, getting paid, you know, a couple $100 a week, and, you know, just kind of figuring it out. And you know, it's slowly grown from there. I think what's done best for us is user generated content. Our community just flows so much content, you know, through our channels, and just loves to take cool pictures of them playing in awesome places. And it's just, it's authentic, it's fun, and it helps us stay in touch with our community, which I think is one of the most important parts about, you know, our brand and, you know, kind of our voice on social media.
That UGC element really is so interesting and key to Spikeball in particular. I mean, you look at, really, there's no other sport out there that I can think of that is so strong with UGC than Spikeball right now, especially one that's an emerging sport. And I guess it's really interesting to think about those different strategic elements that you just spoke about. You think about the school side, and growing the sport kind of grassroots style with a much younger audience, maybe your 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old you know, young boys and girls, and then your college audience, as you mentioned as well, kind of developing that audience, which was a lot of your UGC and your diehards and whatnot, and sort of that social media element as well, and looking at, you know, are we going to be like Dude Perfect and trying to reach that audience perhaps, or and so I guess let's start with kind of the really young kids in the school. When you're going into schools, and this is a little bit beyond digital and social, of course, is that where you guys have that conversation of, do we want to take the quote unquote risk of, is Spikeball going to end up being next to kickball and dodgeball and foursquare, kind of this, you know, the schoolyard sport, as opposed to a sport that people continue playing into their, you know, I mean, yeah, I would love to play dodgeball and foursquare now, but I don't. That's not really part of my routine. So is that part of that conversation with, hey, we're going to go into schools, but we want to make sure this is something that kids are going to want to play outside of school as well, and into their teens?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, you know, my philosophy from, you know, getting it in early with kids, and, you know, I think schools in general is getting it through the teachers. They're the ones that are going to be teaching it every year to a new group of students, you know, hundreds of students every year. So making sure that you give them the tools and resources necessary for them to make it more than just a game. So that was the whole idea with writing a curriculum. That was the whole deal with writing a curriculum. And I think you give those the tools, and you break down the skills of the game or the sport, and make them teachable, so that you can have the students, you know, be successful in their objectives. There's, you know, physical education objectives that they, you know, have to, you know, pass for each grade level. So I think that's kind of the goal, to make it, you know, a teachable sport instead of just a backyard game. And, you know, is breaking those skills down and seeing how they can translate into, you know, other sports, and, you know, becoming physically literate. I think the other important point of it that I always thought was, you know, important for it to not be like a weird niche game, like in, you know, a Quidditch, or, you know, Ultimate's not that way anymore, but it probably used to be. And that's getting kids used to it, seeing it every year, instead of just now college kids playing it like, oh, this is an alternative sport. You know, if they are familiar with it, you know, from grade school on, it's just a normal sport to them. And then they see these tournaments in high school and these leagues, and it's just a normal sport run. It's just part of the you know, the fabric of society. So that's kind of the goal, is like you're going to see that in like a generation. It's going to, it's a long-term play. And we're starting to see that. A lot of our college students, were introduced to Spikeball in middle school 5-6 years ago when I kind of started that. And it's fun. They're looking to join clubs. They're looking at colleges based on their round net clubs and how big they are and how competitive they are. And that's pretty special.
That's awesome. What a cool thing to see, like that, the system work, and then seeing kids that you remember that first picked up a round net kit and then being able to continue playing into their teens and into their college years. And let's touch on the UGC element though, because that's just so cool, and obviously it goes hand in hand with getting young people excited about the sport and excited about sharing clips of the sport and watching clips of the sport. Because there are some cool clips out there for sure. You and I were just looking at a crazy one before we started talking. But so tell me, how did that UGC community, whatever you want to call it, kind of come about? Was it sort of chicken and the egg? Did you guys start to notice some of these cool clips being shared organically and then said, hey, let's fan these flames? Or was it a little more proactive? Hey, this is a very clippable, very memeable, very social friendly sport. Let's try to throw some seeds in the field, so to speak. How did that come about?
I think I'd have to at least tip my hat to the CEO, Chris Reuter, just for back in the day when he started selling Spikeball, from his basement or garage, and sending it himself. After each sale, he would email the person and ask how they found out about it, what they liked, and just kind of develop that, sense of community and personal interaction from the get-go. And that has kind of seeded our community to just kind of be that way, be sharing, be welcoming, and just want to, tell people about, what you're up to. And, I think that led to people saying, oh yeah, we took it camping and, check out this awesome pic. And, then he would post that and share it. And,
yeah.
I don't think it was any strategy from the get-go, but I remember, when I was just a Spikeball fanboy, I would, hashtag Spikeball on Instagram. That's what I would search and see if anybody else posted, and I would check that every day, and you'd see these crazy pictures. And, as the Spikeball account became more, mature, it just made sense, instead of trying to recreate all these awesome environments, just shout people out, give them some free stuff, and let them do it for us.
Hell yeah, that's the vision. I mean, you guys don't have to spend thousands of dollars creating these productions, because there's so many great clips out there that the content that's being created by users, players themselves, is better than anything you guys could create, because it's authentic. It's people showcasing that passion, and it's awesome to see, and you guys continue to do a good job of showcasing that content. And I do want to talk about too, kind of the next level of that is when we started seeing all of a sudden NBA teams, NBA players showing, here's Luka Doncic playing Spikeball, between on an off day, or before, after a practice or whatnot, and that's got to be really damn cool. And it doesn't happen by accident. It opens up, I'm sure, a huge opportunity for you guys to to build off that and get that traffic up, get the interest up even more. So when something like that happens, when the Dallas Mavericks share a clip of Spikeball being played, what can you guys do to piggyback off of that, and what can you guys do to help that happen more? And what kind of happens in that moment, and what happens in the days and weeks following?
Yeah, no, that's
there's a lot there. I know.
It's kind of it's complicated, and it's new for us too. So we're kind of learning how best to do it. Every time it happens, and how much attention each of these posts need that that get posted by one of these pro teams or pro athletes, and what we can do to bolster it and boost it, and trying to comment on it, and tag some likely of accounts that follow that account closely, and try and get other brands interacted, and just get more eyeballs on it. I think is the goal, but it's something that we're always testing the waters on and figuring out kind of on the fly. And it happens a lot. We would have the NHL bubble, the Hurricanes would post, the Dallas Stars would post, multiple in the same day, and you're just like, wow, this is great. The NHL would post on their YouTube channel, and then they made a cool little graphic, and they had Spikeball, in the middle of this collage, and it's just
that's so cool.
It's wild to see all of this stuff, and for me personally, to be the one that sent those sets and created those relationships, it's great to see that payoff. And it's fun to see the content and the people just, enjoy themselves using our product, because that's what it's all about. Like, that's the best part of my job is, at the end of the day, we're selling a product, but, our community, we're selling a product that, like, people have fun using and creates joy, and people have met each other and gotten married from it. And, like, it's created so much good in the world. And, in the physical education side, I've had so much more of an impact on so many more students around the world than I would have just being a PE teacher. So, like, that fulfills me, and it's I don't know, it's wild.
That's so great. Are you, like, how much can you really track, hey, I went and visited, these number of schools, or hey, I made contact with these colleges, or hey, I sent kits to these teams or these ambassadors or potential ambassadors? Are you then trying to, I guess, capture hey, because I visited these schools, all of a sudden now there's an increased interest, or there's social media posts that are happening? It just seems like there's ambassadors being created every day, and they are the propensity to post content about Spikeball seems to be pretty high, which is great for you guys and great for your brand. And I imagine that's part of the strategy. It's part of the point of it all, of kind of creating these ambassadors. And so, like, I guess, tell me how much can you guys track sort of the ROI of creating ambassadors and spreading the sport, and how that translates into the digital and social media space to sort of amplify that? And then, what's sort of the strategy of building those ambassadors moving forward as well, and how can you get them to be people that are spreading the sport both through grassroots as well as through sharing content online? Another loaded set of questions for you, Tyler. I'm just I'm killing it today.
No, that's solid. Data tracking and trying to figure out what you're doing and if it's making an impact is super important, and it's always been like a hard part of my job, because my job has always been, we know Spikeball is great for PE, and we know it moves the needle, more sales than Skylar can track, through his PE portal and trackable sales, because these people go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy Spikeball, or they buy Spikeball on Spikeball.com with their personal credit card instead of the school's credit card, or
right.
They buy it on Amazon, and then we don't have any customer data, so there's just no way to track it, so from a teacher's perspective and a school perspective. And then we actually have ambassadors go in and teach Spikeball for the day, and we've tried to, hey, all the students in the class, we see 600 students in a day. Hey, here's the coupon code. Go try this out. We printed out cards. 2 out of 500, got used or something like that. So It wasn't worth it, trying to track sales that way. But, I guarantee you many of those kids went to Target and bought Spikeball, or went and bought it on Amazon. But, there's just no possible way to track that. So
right.
It's one of those things where you just, like, the big pie is moving, in the right direction, or the needle's moving in the right direction. So hopefully we continue to do this.
Right.
So it's tough, but I mean, I physically can track how many students we have directly taught for an hour. And we pay ambassadors to do that, and we give a free Spikeball set away to the teacher as a thank you. And we've done over 110,000 students in the last 3 years, and I think per year the cost for us on that is like 50 cents a student, which it's
incredible.
I would assume that, like, advertisers pay that for seconds of people's attention, and this is, we're getting 45 minutes of hands-on activity with these people. And I think from a teaching teachers standpoint, going to these professional developments, we actually generate money based on the number of teachers we teach, because they end up buying sets, even though we donate sets. And
right.
So that's actually more lucrative. And then, you try and track all those sales, and, it's pretty wild. And I think, my bosses asked me, hey, when you go to a school or go to a big district and teach all these teachers, can we check, like, store data, at Walmart or, on Amazon, and see if there's an uptick in sales, and, or there's an uptick in ambassadors. And that's, like, really deep analytical stuff, and it'd be great to see that. But it's like, I don't know how much juice to squeeze is, really
right.
worth on that. So we just kind of know it works, and we've seen, we know that these ambassadors got taught in middle school, and now they're freshmen in college.
Totally.
They want to be an ambassador, and, they want to sell sets to their friends who don't know about Spikeball. They want to be the first ones to get, the cool new swag, and, run tournaments and share all their fun college spikeball accolades, with their networks, and that's kind of where it all boils down to.
It's 1,000% like a marathon, not a sprint with this stuff. If every property, every brand, and sports and beyond is trying to reach that, that under 15, whatever demographic you want to call it, that really young group that is still forming their passions and their loyalties that are going to carry them throughout their life. And if a Spikeball ambassador introduces the sport into an elementary school or middle school, and that person may not buy a Spikeball kit tomorrow. They may not buy one in 2 years, but they're going to have that knowledge of Spikeball. They're going to see someone playing on the beach and go and play with them, or they're going to join. They're going to notice it in college. They're going to join the club and then buy their own kit. And it's definitely you're thinking about the long term and not tomorrow. And the fact that you don't have to buy whatever a $250,000 TikTok ad to reach that young audience and reach them in a really engaging way is a pretty powerful thing of what you guys can be able to do with those ambassador programs.
Absolutely. And, from those ambassador programs, those are, the people that then start running, leagues in their city or get connected with the Parks and Recs department in their city because they're the Spikeball guy in their town or girl in their town. And, they can help them run it because the Parks department doesn't really know much about it, but this expert does. And then this person's like, oh, well, I can run tournaments on my own and start to make some money. And then they become part of this ecosystem of the sport. And, we want to provide opportunity and support for these people to then, make that part of their living. And, if somebody can run a round net club and make a living, that's great for our sport and our community, because then that's like a steadfast, program in that city. I know that if I go to Atlanta, I'm going to, this round net club.
Yeah.
And, that's the place to go. And that's really good for the future of the sport. And I think that's where, we have this big, funnel where we try and get as many people in, by making it easy and fun to play. But we, bring them down into the competitive side, of the sport, and also the organizational side of, running tournaments, leagues, and all that, can help build community, which is fulfilling for them, and also can be, a monetary, good investment in the future.
Loved being able to hear from Skylar and pick his brain. Really cool stuff, and a different type of conversation we get to have on this podcast about really just growing the sport from scratch. I mean, a lot of times we're thinking about, these established brands, these teams that have been around for generations, and Skylar and his colleagues are starting from nothing and have really grown Spikeball and continues to do a great job doing so in his role today. So listen up, that's episode 181 if you want to hear that full chat. Last up, we've reached the end, but oh boy, are we ending with a great one. The last up on the best of the Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, you're going to hear part of my conversation with Scott Kegley. He is VP of Digital Strategy now for AMBSE, Arthur M. Blank Sports Entertainment, which is behind the Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. When we spoke, Scott was still with the Minnesota Vikings. Prior to that, he has had such a great career in sports, in leading digital, leading social, and we talk about a little bit about that, about going from the trenches to being a leader, about how they evaluate innovation and how you take next steps and look at new platforms, new technologies. Scott and his colleagues are always ahead of the curve, and he just does such a great job of putting these insights into thoughtful responses. I cannot say enough good stuff about this, so listen up, part of my chat with Scott.
When we, because I started talking a little bit about launching platforms, and I promise I'll get to answering your question here. But when we launched Instagram, for some of the older social media folks out there, when Instagram launched, it was only an iPhone app, and they did not have an app for Android. And so everybody at the time at the Niners either had a BlackBerry, or I was one of the only people with an Android. And for us then to we could not be on Instagram, and I kept trying to make the case to get an iPhone. It was like, well, we don't, support those just yet, and all of that. And so I started the 49ers Instagram account using my iPod Touch connected to Wi-Fi at the NFL Combine that season. And I think as you start to grow, and so go back and look at some of the initial, unless they've deleted them now because they're embarrassed by them, but look at some of the initial, posts. on the 49ers Instagram account. But, the point of that is, we just did it. I think that my philosophy in terms of gaining either like resources or, like maybe credibility, if you want to call it that, within the organization is, bite off more than you can chew, show value in that. And then that's going to lead to more headcount. That's going to lead to, developing a bit more of a business strategy behind some of the things that you're doing, like prove the value in what you're doing. And I think people will, respond to that. And then kind of fast forward, I don't know how many years in between, but, the first year that, Snapchat, really launched and was popular among sports teams, it happened like right kind of towards the start of the season. We had some other things that we were trying to get off the ground, mainly 40 Viners, kind of like Vine concept that we were doing. And so that was just getting off the ground. And I was like, we just don't have the staff to do this right now. Like we don't have the staff to do an effective job. It's like something would fall by the wayside. And as much as, I would like to do this, we're just not in position to. We don't have the headcount, we don't have the time and resources to do it properly. And so we waited. And I thought, gosh, like when we launch this, like it's got to be great. And so, we ended up launching all black uniforms that off season. And so I, brought up in a meeting, I was like, hey, can we reveal them for the first time on Snapchat? And that'll be our first post. And so everybody looked at me like, okay, like, why would we put that on Snapchat? Like, our riders are not on Snapchat. And I'm like, if there's an image of our jersey that's on Snapchat, somebody's going to screenshot that. Somebody's putting it on Twitter. And then all the riders are going to take that and say, hey, the 49ers launched their new jerseys or gave a sneak peek of their jerseys on Snapchat. And so then it was going to be out there, right? And it was like, that's exactly what happened. And of course, Snapchat numbers, spiked on day one. So even though we waited, an entire year, we now came up with like a really good business strategy and concept in terms of launching our Snapchat account. So we really didn't lose anything by not being, active on it, because we still had a really good launch strategy. And I think that's really important when you start a new channel, is because you really get one opportunity to make a first impression. And that was the first impression that we wanted to make. But I thought that that was really kind of a turning point too, where you now have things like Snapchat being talked about by, C-level leadership and, your head of communications, where we're all, talking about exactly what shot we want and how we want it to go out on Snapchat. Like personally, that was just a really cool moment and a really cool day, with a lot of people really buying in the organization to Snapchat, which was great to see. But I think one of the things that, has driven digital, growth over the years really is how we've been able to monetize platforms. Like from a business strategy perspective, monetization opportunities, if you do it well, and there is a way to do it well, they like, now you're talking about having a business plan around, the media that you're creating. It's just like the same thing. Would you start, a television show and just keep on, producing episodes if no one was tuning in, or if nobody was, paying you to do it, right? Like there's some diminishing return there. And so I think that we've always, we haven't sold, posts and things like that. We've sold content.
Yeah.
We package content in the same way that you would package it for any other platform. Granted, it's a little bit different, when you get down into the minutia, generally it's the same overall concept. And that's kind of led into, I know we'll kind of talk about, this weird off season, but when you have, a lack of games and people, like we haven't had fans in our building to this point. And so what that does to your partner revenue, they're not able to activate with fans in the building. Well, a lot of that shifted to digital. And so it's like, if you can't say that that's a key part of your, business strategy at that point, I think you're mistaken, because it's been a huge opportunity for us, especially not just this off season, but especially this off season.
Totally. And you're investing in it all the time as well. You're developing that strong digital content, digital strategy so that you can monetize it.
Exactly.
Let's touch on that real briefly though too. Like, I think maybe it's wrong to say we're at the point, but we're getting to the point where, a lot of people more people understand digital, understand social, understand the value. But especially on the team side, you guys aren't in the room with making the first pitches. Maybe later down the road with a partner, or a partnership marketing manager. But like, how do you help educate, whether it's the partners, the sponsors, or your own sales team on here's how to pitch digital and social, how to convey the value? And is that, giving them numbers? Is that helping them present numbers? Is that helping them present concepts and why they're valuable? Like, what's that education process like, both on the sponsor side as well as internally?
Yeah, well, we've always said, have us in the room whenever you want us in the room. Right. Like I actually have been in some of, the initial, meetings, with different partners and some of the initial pitches. And, I've also been kind of brought in when maybe things had to change for a partner this off season and they just needed me to walk through, what this Instagram stories, Snapchat concept looks like, and how their brand can be integrated. So we've been brought in at different times. I think it just comes down to having a level of trust and empathy for, what each group is looking to accomplish. And I think that's really what we have with our team, here at the Vikings. I think they do an absolutely fantastic job on the, the sponsorship and the activation side. And, if we have, feelings a certain way, or a way that we think things can be done in a slightly different way for a partner, they're, open to, trying some different things and advocating for that with the partner. And likewise, if they're in a tricky spot, or they're, they really know what the partner wants and wants to see that through, we'll work with them to kind of figure out how we can make that work, or come up with additional recommendations. It's all like, one of my least favorite words is no. Like, can you do this? No. There's a way to work towards yes with every type of response, right? Like, so if there's a way that you can figure out how to make something work, maybe it's in a slightly different way than was originally thought. But I think that, when social and digital sponsorships are done correctly, it takes both groups really working towards a yes.
And at the end of the day too, right, we're all, maybe it's an oversimplification, but we all are trying to accomplish the same thing. We want to create great content for fans that they're going to enjoy, they're going to appreciate, and it's going to, be deemed successful for the partner and their goals. And so, like, if you're making a recommendation, it's not because you really want to run with this idea or hate an idea. It's because you know that this is going to work better based on what you know about fans and what the data says as well.
Yeah, exactly. If a content partnership fails, that's good for nobody. Like, everybody loses. If that's from an engagement standpoint, that's not only bad for social, it's bad for the partner. So I think that trying to find, we talk about, kind of 3 keys to kind of a perfect partnership. And it's, is it good for the fans? That's got to be number 1, right? Mm-hmm. Are we producing good content? Is it good for, the partner, right? Like, are they getting what they want out of it? And is it good for the team? What's the, and I think that's kind of the hardest one. What's the team, what's the partner, really bringing, or what's kind of the added value that they can, that they can bring? How can you leverage some of the really unique, cool things about some of the partners that we work with? It helps tell their story and ultimately makes for a really cool fan experience, because our fans care about a lot more than just the Minnesota Vikings. They have a lot of different interests, and kind of how you can lean into that, kind of almost from like a lifestyle piece too, with some of these things that when you're working with some really innovative brands can ultimately bring to the table. I think it can be pretty powerful.
Oh man, I could do a full episode just on this topic and conversation about sponsorship. This is awesome, Scott. I do want to kind of back up a little bit, but just to have a kind of a bigger conversation potentially here. You were talking a lot about Snapchat, and then of course stories are around these days. There's so much more content, and in particular, I think when Snapchat started, that was maybe the and the idea of a story, the idea of quick raw content in the moment, that there really was a huge bar raised for trust for everyone from certainly the manager, the director level, but even at the coordinator level, the specialist level, wherever that title is, that okay, I'm not going to see this before it goes out, so I have to make sure that they're not going to present the team in a bad situation. They're not going to have anything bad that a player or coach is saying, or there's this whole level of trust that's needed. So how has that kind of evolved in your time, both managing platforms yourself as well as now in a supervisor role of making sure that you can trust someone to make sure that they're not going to put anything out there that could even be remotely construed in a negative way?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I think is maybe the first thing to consider, especially like when I started here and I was just kind of getting to know who was on staff, and I think knowing what not to do is maybe that's like the starting point, right? Because I think you can, like, we're a very visible, part of the organization. Everybody, which is different, right? Your PR staff, like, they're doing tons of things throughout the day. Does everybody see exactly what everybody on the staff is doing? Nope. On digital and social media, like, you see everything that we do. Like, everything is public. And, when I mentioned that our social manager has a background in public relations, he also has a really good line of communication with our PR staff. And so knowing maybe what not to do, or just kind of how to kind of phrase some of those things in a, the way that maybe we want to convey them, and get our message out there is extremely important. And then after that, like, go ahead and build on it and do some really cool, fun stuff. Like, social should be fun. Like, we're not, at the end of the day, like, we're not curing cancer here. Like, this is social media. Like, this should be fun. Like, our jobs are fun. But with that, like, yeah, you can, if you take that for granted, you can get yourself in trouble. I think a lot of it comes down to just really having, trust with the athletes. And a lot of that too, when I came here, to the Vikings, a lot of that trust was built already. We had Vikings Entertainment Network that had been built, been around for quite a while. And, we'd been doing player shows and, working with the players to tell their stories, and they knew us, they trusted us, they respected us, and we returned that trust and respect. In San Francisco, that was certainly something that we had to kind of build over time, right? Like, we were starting it from scratch.
Yeah.
A little bit, we'd had some, videos on the site, but especially with social media, and as, players aren't necessarily familiar with platforms kind of, when they first launch or new to them, or they don't personally use something, being able to kind of explain, what that is and what you're doing and the concepts. But, I was in San Francisco. I was the one in the locker room, trying to, get Randy Moss to do an interview. He was there for a season. And, I actually did the first interview with Randy Moss when he was with the Niners, which was pretty cool. And kind of that's, maybe a little bit of a hard sell. It's the first time, like, you've met somebody in a lot of cases, and They don't know who you are. You have to be there. You have to be visible. You have to be around. You have to have conversations about more than, just football and kind of understand who they are, off the field in order to be able to tell their stories correctly. So while I'm not the person in the locker room, like I used to be, our team is down there every day, or at least, a couple people now during COVID are there every day and can at least, work with the players in a slightly modified capacity this season.
Really good stuff there. Listening up to that full interview, episode 182. Just such good stuff. I continue to learn from him, continue to be inspired by him and his work, and of course now everything he's doing down there in Atlanta. That's it for the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found some good episodes that maybe you haven't heard before, and you can go back and through the archive and listen to the full episodes, or of course look for more as well. We've just had so many good chats over the years, nearly 10 years of doing this, and I continue to feel so fortunate, so lucky to be able to learn from these great folks. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. Hit me up on Twitter at NJH287, also on LinkedIn, and we can find more content and write-ups. The website we can find every episode, as well as more articles, is dsmsports.net. And of course, check out the podcast for a new episode coming up on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.